What's the legal framework that we're dealing with here? Well, there's two key things. So we've got the ACAS Code of Practice. Now, this is not a statutory code. Used to be, but it's not anymore. But it is heavily considered by an employment tribunal. And the employment tribunal will look at it and look at the process you've followed, look at the ACAS Code. And if you've not followed the ACAS Code, they're going to want to understand why and what the reason is you did something different. I think part of the reason it's no longer statutory is that it involves three people at least. So you've got somebody doing the investigation, somebody doing the disciplinary hearing, and somebody else available for the appeal. And the ACAS Code is very specific that should be three completely separate people. In a small business, you might not have three separate people. So when they made it a statutory code, immediately we had a problem. Whereas now at least we can say, actually, I don't have those three people, but what I have done is this to make it a fair process. So the ACAS Code is really important. Everything I'm talking about today reflects the ACAS Code. That really is the basis of what we're looking at. The other thing that comes in and comes back regularly is a piece of case law, very old piece of case law, 1978, BHS versus Birchall, and of course there'll be many people who don't even remember BHS because it's went a good few years ago now. But BHS versus Birchall, and in this particular case, something to do with some purchase of some sunglasses, and the employee was dismissed. The actual details don't really matter, but what the case did was laid out the expectations on an employer of dealing with a fair process. And that's where all these other bits come in here. So on the first bit to remember, as an employer, we are dealing with the balance of probabilities. Is it likely that they did it? Now that does mean that in theory, although it's not ideal, we could have two people telling us a different story, no other evidence, and decides that actually we're going to believe this one and not this one. And as long as we can kind of defend why we're saying actually we'll believe in this one, and usually that's where we'll be looking at something, some other evidence that indicates that. But we're looking at that balance of probabilities. So many people get tripped up on this and think that we're looking at beyond reasonable doubt. Beyond reasonable doubt is a criminal law situation, very different to employment law. The courts looking at beyond reasonable doubt can't look at things like circumstantial evidence. They need to consider that. They need to be looking at, is there any doubt that this person may have done this? Whereas in an employment situation, then we can look at the evidence and say, no, actually, we believe they did, and it's a genuine belief that they did what we believe that they did on the balance of probabilities, and that we've got reasonable grounds for that belief. And that comes from our investigation, and this is where we need to do a full and thorough investigation. Now, full and thorough investigation also can't be a kind of a witch hunt or a door knock. So when the police are dealing with a criminal investigation, they can go knocking on doors and just say, oh, this thing happened, do you happen to know anything about it? We can't do that in employment because we've also got to balance things like confidentiality, the fact that we've got a duty to protect our employees and a duty regarding their data. So we can't just go door knocking and asking everybody. We have to look at, with our investigation, it's going to be much more narrow. And the same as we can't put a poster up in the office going, oh, did you see this? And whereas obviously the police can. So we've got to keep narrow that actually, if somebody doesn't know that this incident happened, then they shouldn't know the incident happened. Whereas if somebody did and they were a witness to it, they should be part of the investigation. So that's our full and thorough investigation, and a reminder that we are not in a criminal situation. We are in an employment situation. We're dealing balanced probabilities, but we do need to have reasonable grounds, which is that investigation, for therefore a genuine belief that this person actually did this thing on the balance of probabilities. And that then the outcome that we give, whether that's a written warning, first written warning, a final written warning, or a dismissal or dismissal, summary dismissal for gross misconduct, whichever outcome we give, that is in a range of reasonable responses, i.e. if I was to ask employers walking down the streets what outcome they would give in that situation, a decent number of them would be saying the same or roughly the same as what you've said. And that range of reasonable responses may also vary between industries. So swearing at work, for example, may well be acceptable in one company, and therefore to suddenly dismiss someone for it wouldn't be in the range of reasonable responses. Whereas in another, let's say a school, for example, shouting out a swear word down the corridor is probably going to be within the range of reasonable responses of gross misconduct. So it's a variance. So one, it's acceptable, one, it's gross misconduct. So we'd be looking at in that situation. So if we were to look at a sort of a reasonable number of schools, would a reasonable number of them give that kind of answer? So that's what we're talking about with the range of reasonable responses. Welcome to HR for non-HR managers. If you are a people manager, a business owner, or perhaps you work in HR and you're looking for a more practical application of employment law, then this course is absolutely for you. I'm going to take you through every step of the things you need to know to build up the foundations to be able to manage your team really effectively and keep your business safe. I've devised this course in a way that takes you through each of the foundational pieces as you need them and puts together the building blocks that you need. Look forward to seeing you throughout the course, and good luck.